Why does music theory use Roman numerals of all things to label different chords? Aren't the chord names enough? Isn't it more important that I know these are G major chords? Why do I care what the Roman numerals are? And why can't I just use regular numbers? Today we're diving into the basics of Roman numerals, the key to unlocking chord progressions. Chord progressions are the foundation of how music moves and creates emotional impact, making them essential for understanding composition, improvisation, and even performance. Roman numerals allow us to explain chord relationships, which is what chord progressions are. To understand Roman numerals, you should know how to build major and minor scales starting on any note, know the natural, harmonic, and melodic minor scales, recognize intervals, recognize key signatures, and recognize the 4 types of triads: major, minor, diminished, and augmented. If you're not confident in these concepts, brush up on them and head back here. Let's start by building triads in the key of C major. Every major key consists of 7 unique notes, numbered going up from 1 to 7. The little caret above each number is the symbol for scale degree. And each of those notes can be the root of any triad. If we take each note in the scale and stack thirds above it, we get a set of chords that naturally belong to the key. If we start on C and stack thirds, we get a C major chord, C, E, G. Move up to D and stack thirds, and that's a D minor chord, D, F, A. If we keep doing this for the whole scale, we get E minor, F major, G major, A minor, and B diminished. Since these triads occur in the same order in every major key, we label them with Roman numerals that correspond to the scale degree of the root of each chord. This order remains consistent in all major keys because all major scales follow the same pattern of whole steps and half steps, which is what determines the quality of each triad in the first place. Uppercase numerals indicate major chords, lowercase indicate minor, and lowercase with a small circle indicate diminished. Here's what we get in every major key: major 1, minor 2, minor 3, major 4, major 5, minor 6, diminished 7. Memorize this. So if we're in G major, 1 is G, 2 is A minor, 3 is B minor, and so on. In B flat major, we get this set of chords. The same qualities in the same order in every major key. But why Roman numerals? Well, we use numbers in music for everything. If you see the number 3, does that mean scale degree 3, the interval of a third, beat 3 of the music, a triplet, a figured bass number? Do you play that note with your third finger? We have so many numbers, it gets confusing. The Roman numerals always specifically refer to the chords in a key. Roman numeral 3 is always the chord built on scale degree 3. Okay, so these are the Roman numerals of major keys. Why do we care? Because they tell us the function of the chords, not just their letter names. Each Roman numeral has a unique function, purpose, and identity within the key, distinct from the other chords. For example, the 1 chord is home base, and most chord progressions are a journey from there to the 5 chord, which creates tension because it contains the leading tone, which wants to return back to 1. Every other chord plays a different role somewhere in this journey. The 7 chords have 7 unique functions, meaning they each tend to go to a particular set of other chords. This concept of chord function is a huge topic, and I have a video about it that will blow your minds. But for now, let's just worry about how to build and recognize the chords. Let's go back to the chord progression from the beginning of the video. That G major chord could be the 1 chord, the home base, in a G major progression of 1, 4, 5, 1. Or in C major, the G chord could be the 5 chord. Or it could be the 4 chord in D major. The same notes of G major play completely different roles in each key, which means you'll also approach how you perform those chords differently. You can also take that 1-4-5-1 pattern, play it in any key, and the relationship between the chords stays the same, even though the notes and the chord names are completely different. Since the relationships between the Roman numerals are unique, these are things you can actually hear, identify, and communicate to other musicians. If you say 1-4-5-1 to a musician who understands Roman numerals, they will know exactly what you mean. Practicing these in every key will help them become second nature. Try picking a random major key, writing out the chord progression for 1-4-5-1, then play it and see if you can hear these relationships. Now, let's take a closer look. In a major key, 1, 4, and 5 are all major chords. When writing in major keys, composers usually use these chords the most because they sound major and reinforce the majorness of the key. There's also a pattern here. The 5 chord lies a fifth above 1, and the 4 chord lies a fifth below 1. This fifth relationship to 1 gives 4 and 5 a special harmonic strength not found in the other chords. This should also help you memorize the chord qualities. If you can remember that 1, 4, and 5 are major, and that 7 is the diminished chord, all that's left are the minor chords, 2, 3, and 6. Now let's look at Roman numerals in minor keys. Compared to a major scale, the 3rd, 6th, and 7th scale degrees are all a half step lower, changing the pattern of whole steps and half steps completely, thereby changing the qualities of every Roman numeral in the key. In minor, the pattern becomes minor 1, diminished 2, major 3, minor 4, minor 5, major 6, and major 7. Memorize this too. Here, 1, 4, and 5 are all minor triads. 2 is the diminished chord, and the remaining chords, 3, 6, and 7, are major. Notice that the 5 chord is minor and not major. This means that in a natural minor chord progression, we don't have the strong 5-1 relationship that we're used to in major keys because there's no leading tone. This is important. Listen to the minor 5 between two 1 chords. Now let's see what happens when we raise scale degree 7 and turn the 5 chord into a major triad. The minor 5 was sort of a softer, gentler progression. The major 5 creates a much more intense pull back towards 1, mirroring the effect of 5 to 1 in major keys. Since we've changed the underlying harmony here by raising the leading tone, we call a minor scale with a raised leading tone the harmonic minor scale. But when we do that, the 5 chord isn't the only thing that changes. Raising the leading tone also affects two other chords. 7 becomes diminished instead of major, and the 3 chord becomes augmented if we decide to use it. That one's not that common. But by raising the leading tone, we add 3 more chord options to our inventory. Augmented 3, major 5, and diminished 7. Using chords from the harmonic minor scale ensures that we have a strong pull back towards 1, which is crucial in both classical and popular music. This pull creates a sense of resolution and finality, making progression sound more structured. In practice, composers almost always raise the leading tone in the 5 and 7 chords, but the 3 augmented chord is rather rare. This gives minor keys a full inventory of 10 basic chords. Minor 1, diminished 2, major 3, augmented 3, minor 4, minor 5, major 5, major 6, major 7, and diminished 7. Notice that the 2 versions of the 7 chord have 2 different roots, which is not true of the 2 versions of the 3 or 5 chords. For this reason, we give these chords different names. The major 7 chord is called the subtonic, and the diminished chord built on the leading tone is called the leading tone chord. Technically, we could also take the melodic minor scale, which raises scale degree 6 in addition to 7, and have another set of chords that contain raised scale degree 6. That would be a minor 2 chord, a major 4 chord, and a diminished 6 chord. However, in practice, composers rarely use the raised scale degree 6 as part of the underlying harmony. They use it to avoid the augmented second in the melody, which is why we call it the melodic minor scale. Composers do use these chords occasionally, but they're not that common. The chords that contain the raised leading tone are fully integrated members of the minor key chord system. Okay, now that we understand triads, let's take it one step further. Seventh chords. Hopefully you also know your 5 types of seventh chords: major, dominant, minor, half diminished, and fully diminished. By stacking another third on top of a triad, you add the seventh to that chord, creating a slightly different, fuller sounding chord that still serves the same function as the triad with the same Roman numeral. Listen to the 5 chord as a triad and as a seventh chord. We can add sevenths to every Roman numeral. In a major key, these become a major 7 chord on 1, minor 7 chord on 2, minor 7 chord on 3, major 7 chord on 4, dominant 7 chord on 5, minor 7th chord on 6, and a half diminished 7th chord on 7. In minor keys, we get a minor 7th chord on 1, a half diminished 7 chord on 2, a major 7 chord on 3, a minor 7 chord on 4, a minor 7 chord on 5, a major 7 chord on 6, and a dominant 7 chord on 7. When we raise the leading tone in minor, that adds a dominant 7 chord on 5 and a fully diminished 7th chord on 7. That 3 augmented chord is already rare, and adding a 7th to it is even less common, so we're going to leave it out here. Seventh chords are everywhere in Western music, from classical to jazz and everything in between. Jazz standards frequently add sevenths to almost every chord. And even in Bach's music from the early 1700s, you'll come across some really crunchy seventh chords. That's the basics of Roman numerals. Learning them is a critical first step in understanding music theory. This is just the beginning. Mastering these concepts will make it much easier to analyze music, recognize common progressions, and understand more advanced harmonic techniques. Once you've mastered these basics, we can finally explore chord progressions in major and minor keys, how chord progressions work in modes, which is totally different, and learn how composers modulate between keys. But we can't do any of that until we have a solid grasp of these fundamentals. Why don't you start by checking out my chord by chord series, where I explain how composers write chord progressions one chord at a time. Thanks for watching. Have you noticed the same progression appearing in different songs in the music that you listen to? Is there one that you really like or that stands out? Have you ever tried analyzing them using Roman numerals? Try it and let me know in the comments what your favorite Roman numeral progressions are. See you next time on Dr. Fromm's Music Lab.